Brian, for those who haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
Well, it all started in 1971 when two people fell in love. And a year later, they had a bouncing baby boy. Now, I've been active on LinkedIn and other social media platforms for several years. But really, in the last year and a half to 2 years, I noticed that there was a lot of expertise being shared, but there was no encouragement being shared. And the reason that I jumped on the platform as heavily as I did, back in 2017, I went through a pretty savage job loss. And so I was 6 months searching for a new position, and I was really using LinkedIn to try to network and try to see if I could land something. And I did land something through LinkedIn. But I kept seeing all this expertise, and I'm like, wait a minute, what about people like me out there that really needed encouragement? When people go through things, the last thing they need is expertise, but encouragement's universal. I thought, let me just get back and let me see if I can become LinkedIn's intentional encourager.
You were in a pharmacy job of some sort back in like 2017.
Yeah. So I'll kind of, for those in the pharmacy business, I'll kind of give you my journey. I started out almost 26 years ago in food service, and got up to about 330 pounds because I like to eat a lot of the things that I sold.
Wow. What are you now?
About 270. At my heaviest, I was 361.
No kidding.
I'm a little beefy. This COVID thing, I put on about 20. So
yeah. Join the club.
But no, I came to pharmacy kind of late in life, so to speak. I spent 15 years in the food service industry working for the two biggest food service distributors in the United States, and also worked for the two largest food service brokerage companies in Kentucky and Western Pennsylvania.
And then you had clients you called on? Restaurants or?
I did, yeah. I did. I called on restaurants, hospitals, nursing homes, schools. When I was a broker, Mike, I got my first job in food at 22 years old. And I got hired with this company, and they said, well, the main line you're going to represent is Sara Lee. And I thought to myself, I have died and gone to heaven here.
Right.
I was like, yes, indeed. Man, it was fun. You always got let in the door when you had that red bag and you had samples for people. They always let
You'd
you.
come with samples.
Yeah, they'd always let you in the door. That was fun.
Nice.
And so I got to represent some cool lines in that side of the business. I represented Nestle and Sara Lee. And
was that cold calling and just supporting a business?
When I worked for the distributor, that was my job, was territory management and cold calling and things like that. When I worked for a broker, I worked with distributors to go into these customers and sell new menu ideas. I left that business in 2009 after I had weight loss surgery. I just wanted to kind of do a whole different thing. And I ended up in higher education for about 3 years. And in fact, the college that I worked for, Mike, while I was there, they started a farm tech program. And so we were recruiting students for farm tech. And so then I transitioned to, in 2012, got the opportunity to work with my late father. My dad called me one day and said, would love for you to come to work with me. And, thought about it, prayed about it. And I was like, I get this opportunity. And we had some really long-term goals. And we worked together 10 months. And then he passed away on the road. And so,
what field was that in?
Mike, that's the interesting thing. That was in heavy-duty rotating electrics.
Really?
So the layman's terms is starters and alternators and the component parts. I am the least technical guy you would ever want to meet. Did that for about 3 or 4 years. And here's how I got into pharmacy. I was sitting at a school bus show. I was sitting at a national school bus show in Richmond, Virginia. My son had just started his freshman year of high school, and my wife calls me and she said, Bryce made the basketball team. Like, fantastic. But Mike, I was traveling. I was on the road 3 nights a week covering 6 states, covering from Memphis, Tennessee to Charleston, South Carolina. And I had a big decision to make. I was like, do I want to be a dad that his wife FaceTimes for ball games during the week, or do I want to be home? And so, I was really struggling because my dad wasn't there. And I was like, what do I do? And so I called my mom and I said, Dad got me into this industry, but I don't want to disappoint him. And she said, you need to do what you got to do. And so that's how I saw an ad for a retail pharmacy chain here, knew the former CFO, and this is a cool part of the story, Mike. I called and I said, hey, I see this ad on Indeed and I'm interested. I'm trying to find this person. And the administrative assistant said, well, he doesn't work here anymore. And I said, well, the reason I called was this. And she said, if you'll send me your email directly, I'll make sure you get into the stack. I mean, it was literally right at the cutoff. And so when I got the job, she told me, she said, I never answer the phone. You just happen to call the day I answer the phone. And so that's how I jumped into the world of pharmacy.
Was that one pharmacy?
Yes, it was a 30-store retail pharmacy chain. And so they were presented with an opportunity, Mike, to get into the specialty pharmacy game because a lot of the drugs that they were doing were open distribution drugs. And so, they got an opportunity to get into that through a certain business model where they would have a third party that would do their prior auths and do that service for an office. And so my job was to walk in and go, hey, we know there's a certain percentage of scripts that you're sending out to mail order pharmacies. We can fill those here locally.
All of this gives credence to your book title because you've been in food, you've been in college recruiting, you've been in car and big machinery, you've been in prescription.
I kind of feel like Forrest Gump, Mike. I probably, instead of writing the book People Buy From People, it should have been titled Life is Like a Box of Chocolates.
You've been in so many things, and so your book...
I didn't play running back at Alabama. I'll just say that.
I always tell people, I'll just do it very nonchalant. I'll say I played... Because my dad, he got a scholarship to Purdue in football, but he only played... Back then, they had JV teams like they don't now. They had JV teams, and he hurt his shoulder, never was able to continue. He kept his scholarship. In fact, you remember Len Dawson?
Oh, very well. Great Kansas City Chiefs quarterback.
Lenny was, I call him Lenny like I knew him, but
yeah,
he came into my dad's fraternity, ATO, when my dad was still at Purdue. So in other words, my dad might have been a junior, and Len came in as a freshman. By that time, my dad wasn't playing, but they lived together, and that's all I knew of the story. I actually tried to...
And he wasn't Len Dawson, the Hall of Fame quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, yeah.
No, he was just Len Dawson. I actually tried to reach out to him about a dozen years ago with Twitter or something like that, but never did. But what I'll tell people is I'll say back when I played football at Purdue, and some just let it go and some stop me. And I'm like, well, yeah, I just played out in the field with some of my friends, toss a football around. I never said I was on Purdue's football team.
You know what, Mike, that reminds me of a story. So 1970, the school that I went to, Marshall University, had a plane crash that took out the entire football team.
Right.
So my dad was a senior in high school in 1970. And my dad being the youngest of 12 kids, there was a program that the local school system had where kids in the community that didn't have a lot of money and were underprivileged could work in the community. The community would have jobs for them. My dad ended up working at Marshall University around the football team. So the summer of 1970, he was down at Gullickson Hall where they would work out, play basketball, keep themselves in shape over the summer. They'd wash uniforms. They would get things ready for the start of the season. And then on game days, because he was 17, he could only work home games into the fall. And so, he would go down for home games. He'd go behind the goalpost and throw the ball back to the place kicker. And again, that part of the story is relevant because he was 17 years old. Had he been just a few months older, the plane crash happened November 14th, 1970. My dad turned 18 on August the 8th, 1970, or April 8th, 1971. So about 5.5 months. Had my dad been about 5.5 months older, he would have been 18, and having been entrenched, probably would have been a freshman at Marshall then. He likely could have been on that plane that went down that was so infamous. And so, but because he was 17 and still in high school, they couldn't travel until he couldn't travel until he was 18. And so he and my mom were on a date that night. and turned on the radio and heard about the plane crash.
Wow. You wonder how many of those things are like that in life, you know?
Yeah, and you know, when the movie came out, my dad and I went to see it. And
what was that, We Are Marshall or something like that? Or?
Yeah, the movie was called We Are Marshall. Absolutely.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that I worked with in the newspaper business. I've known the guy almost 35 years. He was a freshman on that. He was a redshirt freshman on that 70 team. And to your point, freshmen back then were ineligible to play varsity football. So
yeah.
He was there on campus as part of the football team but couldn't play because he was ineligible. So being ineligible, there wasn't any need for him to travel.
Wow.
And so, I've known Dave probably 35 years, and Red Dawson, I've met Red Dawson a couple of times. He's featured in the movie. He was an assistant coach that was supposed to be on the plane.
Wow.
And gave his seat up to an older assistant coach because the older assistant coach had to get back to Huntington for his granddaughter's piano recital. You know, the 50th anniversary was a few months back, and man, the emotional scars are still there for a lot of people in this region. And
it's really something.
The folks can't see the audio, but behind me is a Marshall football helmet. I've got my Marshall class ring on, and so you know, when everybody talks about the movie We Are Marshall, the scene that Matthew McConaughey plays, where he takes the guys up to Spring Hill Cemetery, that they actually filmed that in Huntington at Spring Hill Cemetery.
Wow. In
front of the monument to the 6 unidentified football players that died in the plane crash.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah, that's a real place. Yeah. If anybody's listening to this podcast and they ever come to Huntington, look me up. I'll take you up to Spring Hill Cemetery and show you the marker up there.
Boy, you're a bundle of joy. No, I'm just kidding. Hey,
see, I don't have people that break me on my podcast, but you know,
I can,
you know, I just, you know, I have a tendency to break people, but that's good, Mike. Yeah, thanks.
So Brian, so you've been in all these professions, and
yeah, we've established I've kind of job hopped a little bit.
What I love about that, I think that's really cool. It proves the point of your book entitled People Buy From People.
Mm-hmm.
Because you probably never imagined that you'd be selling, you know, parts for heavy industrial equipment and so on. But
no clue. Yeah.
You knew that you would be selling people. Now, the average listener of this program, and it's varied, but I think a lot of our listeners, I know a lot of them are independent pharmacy owners.
Yeah. And by the way, the forgotten people in healthcare too. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about healthcare workers and things like that.
Right.
My hat's off to those independent pharmacy owners because, again, you know, let me step off here for just a second. You know, in our industry, as you well know, a lot of pharmacies are, you know, a lot of insurance companies mandate they're mandating the independent pharmacies out of these things. And my hat's off to those folks that continue to fight the good fight for those patients, continue to build relationships with those patients, continue just to understand more intuitively the needs of their patients. And so if you're listening, you're an independent pharmacy owner, my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
And thank you. Well, thank you for what you do in the community.
Well, on behalf of my listeners, I thank you for that acknowledgement. So my point is, most pharmacy owners don't think of themselves as selling because they're like, people come to us, we don't sell, we just know people and we sell their needs. You know, so if a patient comes in, I'm not trying to sell them this and that. I'm just trying to serve them. I know their family, you know, it's people. And it's like, yeah, that's what Brian's talking about here. That's what sales is about. Pharmacists are the best salespeople there are, and they don't realize that because the salesperson is not this, what's the word, swarmy? Is that the word?
Well, here's the thing, Mike. I love where you're going with this conversation because the pharmacist has always been a trusted source in the community because people feel like they can ask questions to their pharmacist that they're not real comfortable asking their doctor. And so, you know, the pharmacist is available when it's 6:30, 7:30, 8:30 at night, and they're taking something, and it's the first time they've taken it, and maybe they're taking something with that particular medication, or they, they've got a little cough or sniffle or something like that. Not everything is COVID-19. You do get a little cough or sniffle.
Are you saying there's still other illnesses out there?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't believe it, Brian.
yeah, I should have wore a mask for this.
I thought all other illnesses just stopped. There's no flu or anything anymore. People don't die from that.
Exactly. But, Mike, here's the thing. The pharmacist has always been a trusted source, and there's a comfort level. Because here's the thing. My wife will do this. If my wife is unsure about something, she'll be like, well, I need to call the pharmacist. She didn't call her family doctor. And so, again, man, I think that the independent pharmacy owner is in a great position right now to really be impactful. And so, stepping back to people buy from people, the first thing you'll find in that book is I make a statement that says this: people buy connection before they ever make a transaction. And so, again, if you're that independent pharmacy owner, if I'm in your shoes, I'm connecting with everybody that comes through the door. I'm not just greeting them. I'm trying to connect with them. I want to have a 5-minute conversation where I can find a piece of information out about you that connects you and I. And so the next time you come into my pharmacy, I want to ask you about that piece of information. I want to file that away and continue to build connection with you.
Brian, when you say file, are you being figurative, or would you ever take, as a pharmacist owner, and physically file that somewhere? Would you ever write that stuff down?
Well, let me give you a good example. When I do the Intentional Encourager podcast, in a conversation, I will take something that someone says, and it could have been 3-4 minutes back, could have been 3 or 4 minutes back. I'll go and I'll say, hey, let me come back to that for just a second. I think a good independent pharmacist can file that away mentally. And if you need a cheat sheet or something to write that down with, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because that patient, that customer, doesn't know what you did. They don't know. Listen, fans in the stands don't care how much time and effort somebody put in the weight room or in the film room to get ready for the game. All they care about is what's happening on the field or on the court.
If you look at Harvey McKay, Swim with the Sharks, he talks about McKay's 66 of writing these things down. I've always thought it'd be cool to have a spot in our computer system. Mine's just memory, and if I'm there more, I can remember it.
Yeah.
For our listeners, he would say that his salespeople is that they had to get this list of 66 things filled out: where they went to college, their favorite food, their anniversary. It was a list of 66 things. I just wonder if any pharmacists these days write stuff down. I probably should. Once in a while, I think about putting something in the patient profile, like they went to Florida for their anniversary, in February. You know what I mean? Just to have that.
But here's the thing. What's better is hanging on to the stuff that people throw away. So a throwaway comment. Okay. So let's think about this for a second. You talk about Harvey McKay's 66 things.
Yeah.
If I am a good connector, I'll remember the core things. I should know the core things. If I'm a great connector, I'll remember the things you don't think I think about. I like to hang on to throwaway comments because, again, somebody says something in a conversation and they say it just throwing it out there. It's like, oh, I'm just going to throw this out here. And again, it goes back to the old adage, Mike, one man's junk is another man's treasure.
Yeah.
And so, again, I want to hang on to the stuff that you didn't think I caught.
Give me an example of that.
We're recording this. You and I can see each other on video.
Yeah.
I'm noticing behind you there's a guitar. It looks like an acoustic 4-string bass.
It is.
Okay. But if I'm focused straight ahead and I say, well, yeah, Mike's got on a black T-shirt, and he's got a microphone, and he's got headphones.
Don't tell people about my pajama bottoms. That was in confidence before we started recording.
Never.
Thank you.
But I will not forget that. I will not forget that.
Okay, so you see my bass guitar.
But I see that 4-string acoustic.
Right.
So I've played bass for about 25 years. I taught myself how to, with a little help from a guy I went to church with, I taught myself how to play a 4-string bass guitar. So I have a Washburn bass that's about 30 years old with Fender flat wound strings. And so picking up in the back, to you, that's something that's just sitting there.
Throwaway, right?
To me, it's like, that's a 4-string acoustic bass. And so now you're looking at me and you're going, yeah, that's right. Well, Mike, tell me a little bit more about it. When you start playing bass? And then when I can go, hey, you know what? I kind of picked the bass up. A guy in my church who played guitar taught me the frets.
Yeah.
And I went from there, and I just started learning how to play bass. And so now it's a deeper connection, because now I notice something you didn't think I picked up on, but it's all about, again, it's honing back in on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, yeah, man, let me tell you about that bass. I do that all the time. When people come on my podcast, I just kind of look around. And so that was one of the chapters in the book, People by Observant. All you got to do is watch. All you got to do is look. I couldn't help but notice, hey, tell me about that. Hey, tell me about your hat that you got on. Or, and those conversations, Mike, don't have to be 2 hours long.
Right.
But that pharmacist can go, hey, saw your son in here the other day.
Right.
Man, kid's getting tall. Hey, I noticed he was wearing a baseball jacket. Is he playing baseball this summer? And now you're going, because let me tell you something. I've been married almost 25 years. My wife is happiest when I notice something that needs to be done and she didn't have to tell me to do it. And so again, by observing, by watching, you get that sense of deeper connection.
Sometimes people can almost stab themselves in the foot by writing something down, because I'll have a salesperson, they'll come in like 2 years later, and they'll say like, how was Drew's baptism? It's like, come on. I don't hold this against you, but I know you wrote that down, because I hardly even remember I have a son named Drew, much less remembering when his baptism was. And so that's good. More power to him, but I know they wrote some of that stuff down.
You know what a great salesperson does? You know what a salespeople doesn't forget?
What's that?
Mike, hey, I saw your daughter come in last week. I know she lives out of town. How's she doing? How's she doing?
Right.
Or I'll tell you this, and I wrote about it in People Buy From People. It's not the happy moments, and those are good. It's not the happy moments that bonds and cements relationships. It's walking in the door. I had a customer. I walked in the door one Thursday morning, and I walk in, and I'm bouncing in there like I do every Thursday morning. And I noticed the girl that I was calling on a little small hotel, and the girl I usually talk to, she's wiping tears away from her eyes, and she said, I lost my brother last night. My brother choked to death. He was in Arizona in his apartment. And so you go to the funeral home, or you go and I had a little sandwich shop in a little town called Oak Hill, Ohio, and a little sandwich shop there, and I go there on Mondays and nobody's there. You're trying frantically to get a hold of him, and you get a hold of the owner and said, yeah, our son got killed in a four-wheeler last night. Those are the moments you better be a connector. Those are the moments you better remember the right things to do and say. Because the happy moments are easy.
Right.
Drew's baptism, that's easy. It's those hard moments that really separate the good connectors from great connectors.
A lot of people don't want to bring that stuff up unless they're told, unless they're given permission by someone like you. They don't think that those are appropriate, but they are, right?
Oh, 100%. And Mike, I'm a Christian, so I would go in to see customers, and I would say, can I pray for you? If I noticed they were not, I had a lot of customers that just said, yeah, I really wish you would. In fact, even to this day, I was talking to an account, and she told me when I called her the other day, she said, I was just calling to check in. That's what I've been doing since the pandemic, and I've been working from home. And she said, I just needed to talk to you today.
Mm.
Just needed to talk to you today. And so that's when you know you're doing something right. And again, it's not that the big pharmacy chains don't have those people that can connect, but we're talking to independent pharmacy owners. If you're doing things that your competition is not doing, you're going to connect with patients and customers because they're not doing it. Focus on connection. If you focus on connection first with your customers, you're going to get things, you're going to reap the benefits from that. And so, Mike, that's the biggest takeaway from People Buy From People. It's not a sales book.
Yeah.
Don't buy it if you want a sales book. It's not a sales book. But if you say to yourself, man, I'd really love to connect with people deeper, better, and stronger. When you read chapter 1, and chapter 1 is People Buy Consistency, I think you'll figure out pretty quick. In chapter 10 is People Buy Memories. And so you figure out pretty quickly they buy authenticity, uniqueness, motivation, meekness, some other chapters there. I wrote the book. I can't remember what I wrote. So, I mean, good grief. And I'm working on the second book. So, I guess I could cheat. I could pull it. Wait a minute.
I've got them here. I've got
People Buy Consistency, engagement, thankfulness, authenticity, empathy, uniqueness, meekness, motivation, observation, and memory. So if you want, but Mike, I'll tell you where that quote came from. It was a quote from my dad. My dad told me before I got my first sales job, he said, never forget, son, people buy from people. And I really thought my dad was teaching me about sales, but my dad, I was halfway through the book, writing it, and I had a V8 moment, and I was like, my dad's not teaching me about sales. He's teaching me about connection.
Right.
And so, yeah. And again, I can't express it enough. If you want to do two things differently than your competition's doing,
yeah,
this is a freebie for your listeners. You don't even have to buy the book to get this. You want to do things that your competitors are not doing, here's two things you need to start doing. Encourage your customers and connect with your customers. You do those two things, because I promise you the big boys are not doing that. It's get you in, get you out, buy stuff,
right,
have a nice day.
Right.
Or else they wouldn't need to do some of the things that they're doing to attract customers. If you're an independent pharmacy owner and you want to attract new customers, here you go. Encourage your customers to come back. Encourage your customers, don't sell them. Encourage them and say, hey, you know what? We have a lot of customers that use this product for this reason. I believe it'll help you. But you know what? Hey, if it's not for you, don't worry about it. I just wanted to encourage you that, keep yourself healthy, encourage your customers. And then the second thing is connect with them.
All right, Brian, devil's advocate. I grew up in my dad's pharmacy, like maybe a lot of our listeners. Well, probably not my dad's pharmacy, but in their own dad's pharmacy or mom's pharmacy.
Yeah. For
me, it seems like second nature. And I bet a lot of people say that growing up with their dad as good salespeople, good fathers and good salespeople. And this is not it is. This is like false humility. Basically, I'm saying, Brian, don't you think that this is so natural for everybody? And then you'll say to me, and if you don't say it, I'll splice it in. You'll say, well, Mike, it's natural for you.
Well, Mike, my initials are BS, so you put two and two together, okay? You can splice that in if you want to. I'm good with that.
It seems like it is natural for everybody. Is it? I mean, does every pharmacist already have this who opens an independent pharmacy, or is it not so natural?
Yeah. So what I wrote in the book, in the chapter on thankfulness, I said this. I said, what if you started thanking people proactively instead of reactively? Kind of to your point about it being second nature. And let's think about that concept for just a second, Mike. Whenever, so the independent pharmacy owner that's out there, when they're doing customer service training or they're training somebody on a front register or something like that, want to greet the customer, smile, thank them for their business, all those things that are reactive. So it's reactive when that customer walks in the door. We go, oh, hi, welcome to Hometown Pharmacy. Thanks for coming. Or, if they're back at the pharmacy counter, they're picking up that prescription, and the pharmacist or the farm tech or whoever's back there working says, "Oh, well, thank you. Have a nice day. Be well. Whatever it is, stay healthy. Whatever." It's all reactive. And so my thought in People Buy From People is, what if we turn that to proactive? What if we started thanking people proactively before they ever made a transaction, or before they ever made a connection, or before any relationship was established? We started proactive things. How much different would you be in the marketplace if you were proactive with thankfulness? So to your point about it being second nature, it's second nature because it's reactive. It's what we're taught and what we're trained to do. Right. My dad always said this to my sisters and I. He always said, if somebody does something for you, you thank them for it. But we don't do that proactively. It's get it first, and then we're like, oh, thank you. That's thoughtful of you. What if we could say, and sometimes these customer appreciation bull crap promotions that happen in the marketplace, it's like, well, customer appreciation, we're going to give away a 6-pack of Coke.
If you make it Bud Light, you got a deal, though.
Yeah, I mean, but why? That's not a customer a true customer appreciation is, look, we wouldn't be in business without you. We're grateful to you. And everybody that comes in today, no matter what they purchase, we're going to give you 20% off just because. You don't have to buy a minimum. You don't have to do this or that. We just want to say thank you. And oh, by the way, we're going to kick an extra 10% in here, and we may do a big raffle, or we may just give away cake or something like that just because. Or just say, hey, it's Thursday. We're going to give candy bars to the kids. Or if you come in and you say, hey, it's Thursday. Why don't you take candy bar?
All right, Brian, here's my counter argument to that. A good friend comes to you and says, Brian, I appreciate you. You've been there. You've been a friend. You've listened to me, this kind of stuff. Brian, I'm going to give you a shiny new coffee mug. You see what I'm saying? They wouldn't do that because it would cheapen it. So when can you cheapen appreciation? Like, I think if I ever called you up someday and I said, Brian, boy, it was sure nice meeting you, and I appreciate your talking to me. I appreciate that you prayed for me. Brian, I'm going to give you $5. It's like, oh, you ruined it, Mike. I would have loved if you would have just called me and said, thanks for being a good guy. Goodbye. Now that you put $5 on it, you've just cheapened everything. So when does that cheapen stuff? When you appreciate people?
Because there is a vast difference between appreciation and value. Here's what I'm talking about.
Tell me more on that.
Here's what I'm talking about.
All right.
If you gave me that coffee mug and you said, Brian, man, I was here and I was thinking about our relationship. And listen, I know you love hot tea. In fact, I'm drinking one now. I know you love hot tea. And man, I don't know if you like these mugs or not, but
yeah.
Man, I was just thinking about you, and I know you love hot tea. And listen, this cannot tell you what I value about you most.
Gotcha.
But man, you're a Reds fan. And so, man, I wanted to pick this up because I just wanted to show you. I just wanted to show you that I value our friendship, and your friendship means a ton to me. That would be valuable to me. I wouldn't throw that away for anything. And here's why I say there's a vast difference between value and appreciation, Mike. I want you to think about something. Here is an analogy. If your house is on fire tonight, and I pray it's not, if your house is on fire, you're going to grab some things that you can't replace.
Sure.
And so I've got them here in where I am. I've got a suit that belonged to my dad. I've got a couple of hats.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab a watch that belonged to him. So what we're going to grab are things we can't easily replace. Wallet, cell phone.
Yeah.
Stuff that we have to have.
Right.
Right? And so think about those relationships with your customers and understand, independent pharmacy owner, when you value that customer and you do the extra things to keep that customer, you are showing far more than appreciation to them. You're showing them that they're valued. And it's not just, well, dear valued customer. No, I don't feel valued when I get a Dear John letter saying, dear valued customer.
Right.
If you really valued me, you'd say, dear Brian, we wanted to send you a letter just because we value your business, and here's why. See, most of the time, Mike, we don't put the why behind why we value people. We don't put the why behind it. And so here's the thing, and I'll share this with your audience. I had somebody reach out to me the other day, want to be on the Intentional Encourager podcast, and I love that. Thank you. That's humbling. But they didn't tell me why. They just said, well, I think this person would be good for your podcast. And so I sent a voice message back on LinkedIn, and I said, okay, tell me why. If you came across, and then the person said, I came across your podcast, I think my business partner would be good. I said, okay, thank you. Tell me why. Because all you did was reach out and said, I think, and here's the thing, take I think out of your vocabulary. Nobody cares what you think. Replace it with I believe. Beliefs are a lot harder to challenge than thoughts. Everybody has thoughts. It's much harder to challenge beliefs. And beliefs come from a deeper place.
Right.
When you believe something, you've put a lot of thought into it. It's thought-driven. It's been tested. That's how it becomes a belief.
Versus thinking.
Like for me, I know what medications work for me because I've tested them. I've proven them. And so I believe in those medications. And so when my doctor says, well, I think we should do this, I would say, okay, well, then tell me why. Why do you think this way, or do you believe it? Because if you believe it, then you're going to be resolute in moving forward with it. If I tell my wife, I think I love you, and I think so after 24 and a half, I think I love you, it's not going to fly. But if I tell her, hey, look, I believe that I am more in love with you now than I've ever been in my life, and here's why. You put that why behind that belief, man, that's a hard combination to beat.
All right, Brian, let me go back on this, though. So my point is valid, though, of saying if you tell everybody you value them and then you say we're going to give 20% off, you have cheapened that. What if you took that 20%? And I know you're saying this, but what if you took that 20% and you said, we're going to take our top 200 customers and we're going to try to find out what's valuable to them. And instead of spending, let's say, $10 across the board, we're going to make that $10 talk with either a Red's coffee mug, someone else, we're going to, give them this or that. I know that's hard, but is giving that 20% off, is that speaking of value or is that cheapening it? Because to your point, it'd be like, what if I said, Brian, here's this mug with Cincinnati on it, but then you found out that I gave one to your brother and to everybody else too, right?
Well, but here's the counter argument to that. So what if you have a customer that's trying you for the first time that doesn't feel valued somewhere else? And you have extended that hand, that right hand of fellowship, and you said, well, if you don't mind me asking, we know a lot of our customers that come in to our pharmacy. Do you mind me asking what brought you in today? Yeah, I saw your 20% off, and my pharmacy doesn't do that for me. And so now you have the opportunity to really build some value and say, well, yeah, we do that for our customers quite often because we want them to understand that this independent pharmacy is different. Here's the thing, Mike. A lot of people are looking for ways to feel valued as customers. And if you want to keep me as a customer, that coffee mug that you give me, if it's something that connects with me, I'm probably going to go, I don't care who you give it to. I like that. Thank you.
If I find something that is universal, that connects with everybody, more power to me. And sometimes that is just a cash or a discount.
So why do you think giveaway promotions are still effective with some of these things? Because a lot of times people can see some value in that. They go, well, yeah, that's worth $5. $5 is $5. And so,
right.
And again, if we're going to distinguish ourselves as independent pharmacy owners, if we're going to distinguish ourselves in the marketplace, then we've got to do what our competition is not doing. Listen, Mike, I try to do everything for the most part intentionally. I have always, 90% of the time, there's intention behind what I say and do. Because again, we've got a society of too many throwaway lines, and we've got a society of sound bites instead of substance, right? So we want to talk in sound bites instead of substance. If I want to connect with you, Mike, I want to have a substantive conversation, because the best relationships, and I want your audience to hear this, professionally, personally, with customers, the greatest relationships are always cultivated in common ground. The greatest relationships that you have are always cultivated in common ground. Don't worry about what you don't agree on.
Common ground.
Look for that place that customer is looking to go, and go there with them. Walk that journey with it.
Give me an example of that, Brian.
Well, here's the thing. In sales, a lot of people are taught to lead, they're taught to, you got to pull that customer in. You got to, push your product.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling a friend of mine that invented a product, I said, your problem is you're pushing your product. When you push, you do this. You put your hands out. When you pull somebody in, you bring them to you. And so again, we want to pull that customer to us. We want to pull them toward us. And the way that we should be doing sales is walking arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with the customer and saying, show me what you see in this buying process.
Yeah.
Show me where you are. And then, because here's the thing, if we're leading them, we're out in front. And we see something totally different than what they see. Don't lead your customer to that buying process. Walk with them.
I got to share this story with you, Brian. I know a lot.
Yeah, please.
I know
man,
a lot of
please.
this is figurative that you're talking, but so I used to have this pharmacist. He was always like pretty contentious with people. It could have been something pretty small, but he was contentious. Tempers would get up and stuff. So I said to myself back then, I said, if I ever get into a situation that's pretty contentious like that, I'm going to go and physically stand on the same side of the counter with this person, so figuratively, at least we're like looking at, well, not just figuratively, but we're actually looking in the same direction, going forward.
Yeah.
So this is about 6 months ago.
Well, why wouldn't you stand in the same spot they are to see what they see? Yeah.
Let me tell you why. Because it was about 6 months ago, and this is after I'd been away from the store for about 5 years. I'd only in once in a while. So I'm finally there, and I go in, and this lady's just pissed. She's pissed at everybody, So I said, well, okay, I'm going to practice. I'm going to go stand on the same side, and I'm going to say, look, I know you're pissed, but I've said, these damn insurance companies, they do this and that to us, and I can see where you're coming from and all this kind of stuff. So I get over there to her side, and she looks at me, and I swear there was smoke coming from her ears. And she said, to me, I'm only going to say this one time. She said, get away from me. It's not like I was in her lap. I mean, I was a foot or two from, but I thought, well, there goes that idea.
Mike, I love what you said there. I had to learn how to control myself in conflict, because I was always, when I was young in sales, I would run from conflict, and I look back and I think to myself, I should have stood my ground. I let a lot of people walk on me. I might have said to that lady, ma'am, respectfully, I'm trying to help you, and you're not doing a very good job of letting me try to help you. I understand. I truly understand why you're upset. I think if you calm down, I believe if you calm down for just a second, we could get to some common ground. But if you want me to get away, that's fine. But I can't help you from away.
Yeah, right.
I can't do anything for you from away. And sometimes I have to tell my wife that. She'll be like, well, I'm going to call and light somebody up. I'm like, okay, understand that you may or may not be wasting good breath. So if you're okay with that, if you tell me to get away, I can't help you from away.
Can't help her then.
And again, I'll say this, Mike. The most sensitive mechanism in the world is a customer. But the customer is not always right. There are a lot of times a customer wants you to do things that are either that are unethical, or if it were their money, if it were their money, they would go, well, that's not a smart decision. Okay, well then understand it's not a smart decision for me as well, because it is my money as the independent pharmacy owner. It's my money. Everything that I have is tied up in this place.
For someone who's saying this is all intuitive, and you mentioned one about, thanking someone in advance and so on. What other things can you think of besides your book? And that's fascinating stuff. I read them. You've got 10 interesting chapters, and each of those has a half dozen points under each chapter.
Yeah, it's the blind squirrel theory in full effect. I mean, blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So thank you. I appreciate that.
There's a ton of good stuff in there.
Thank you.
Out of the 10 chapters, and let's say 6 subjects, out of the 60 things, what else in there do you think is maybe not as intuitive for someone who's cocky like me and says, well, I've seen it all, and I know how to deal with customers and things. What are the things in there maybe aren't as intuitive that you would share with the listeners who are maybe in my position?
People buy meekness.
Meekness. Tell me more about that. You mean, so when I say I'm cocky, that wouldn't go over?
Well, most alpha males are. Most salespeople are. I was.
Yeah.
And so, when you have a modicum of success, you have that confidence. And so, what you don't want to do is you don't want it to stray over to arrogance. You can be confident and not arrogant.
Yeah.
And so what happens, Mike, is meekness, the term meekness, as I was researching it for the book, the term meekness means to be humbly docile or patient. And so again, patience is a hard thing for me because, and again, I think it's becoming harder and harder for most people because of the speed and everything that we have at our fingertips.
Yeah, right.
For a pharmacy owner, if they're running a claim, or they have to get a PA submitted for a medication to get approved.
Yeah.
If it's not turned around in 10 minutes, they're like, man, what's going on at the insurance company? I mean, they busy today, or they're out to lunch or something like that.
Yeah.
And so again, I think people buy meekness. That's going to be the one thing. That's the one thing that I would say that's surprising, is because we don't teach meekness in sales. We don't teach meekness in management and leadership. But sometimes we need to be a little more humbly docile. We need to just kind of step back and go, let me wait 5 minutes for this thing to stay. And for a salesperson, their role is to be the driver, or the leader is the driver. The store owner is the driver. And sometimes it's best to just sit back and just go, let me take 5 minutes and really survey this situation. And let me see what's best, the best way to connect in this situation, instead of being the driver and just going, let me step back here. And I said this in the book, weakness, never confuse meekness for weakness. The old adage is patience is a virtue.
Right.
And so why wouldn't we step back even for 2 or 3 minutes, in those 2 or 3 minutes, and just say, okay, let me step back, take a deep breath, and then decide, okay. And Mike, here's the thing. Great decisions are never made in a hurry. Even great leaders give themselves, even in a snap decision.
Yeah.
Great leaders still have that internal clock where they give themselves a moment to process. And so again, that's that humbly docile, that patience that we're talking about. That's probably one of the surprising things. If people read the book, they're going to say, well, how do people buy meekness? We have to understand that people, in some cases, if they're getting ready to make a big decision, what's the one that, well, let me think this over.
Right.
They're asking for a little bit of patience. And so by naturally and proactively giving them that patience and that room, you actually create greater connection. And you say, well, I totally understand that. You know what? Let's all step back and take a moment and be patient. And it's a powerful connecting tool to really get you and that person in the same vein. Because a lot of people want to push. They're like, oh, let's build relationship, let's connect, blah, 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 blah. Be patient sometimes. Be meek. Because I'm telling you, people today buy meekness. They really do.
I think the value in what you're saying there, Brian, and that's a cool example, and I know there's a ton of other ones, of anybody who's read a sales book over the years has been told the opposite of that without even knowing, because what the book will say is, yes, agree to them, tell them that you understand and this and that. And then the book always says, well, and then here's how you fight that. You say to them, well, Mrs. Smith, if I were to show you this and that, would there be any reason you wouldn't be able to make a decision? You know, they give you all this stuff without just stopping where you are and just saying there's value.
Apparently, you have some reason for feeling this way. May I ask what it is? I remember an old sales
all that
training.
stuff.
Yeah.
There's true value in just meekness.
So here's the thing, Mike. So why, if you have decided to become an independent pharmacy owner, why would you want to think like Walgreens?
Right.
Or why would you want to think like name your big box pharmacy?
Yeah.
You've chosen to do something on your own because you believe in what you do and how you do it and the way you can serve patients in your community. So why would you want to replicate what those folks are doing? The biggest disruptors in any industry really don't care what everybody else is doing. And in sales, I was a lot that way. I didn't want to play in everybody else's sandboxes.
Well, and that's a beautiful thing I love about independent pharmacy. One of the things is that I'm still getting payoff from something that my grandpa did 50 years ago by not pushing too hard on a sale, by spending an hour with somebody and saying, just go home and put your hand in cold water, whatever.
And Mike, here's the thing. You get to decide through having a conversation with the marketplace, you get to decide what you have in your pharmacy that connects with your customers. You don't have to be beholden to what somebody in a corporate office 700 miles away that has never been to your community thinks you should have in your pharmacy. You have the ability to have that intimate conversation with the marketplace where your customers feel like that they are being heard day in and day out.
Your podcast and your book coming up, Intentional Encouragement. Tell me what non-intentional encouragement is.
You know what my 20-year-old told me? I was coming in the house one day and he said, Dad, I'm going to start a podcast. I said, cool, son. That's great. And he said, it's going to be called The Unintentional Discourager. I mean,
that's what I thought about too, Brian, because I know your podcast is good, but I'm going to be a guest on your show coming up later in the week. And I'm not sure whose line this was, but I don't think I'd ever listen to a podcast that would have someone like me as a guest on it.
The first thing is whenever you feel or think that you should encourage somebody, do it then. Do it right then. And so I'm going to walk you what a piece of intentional encouragement might look like. Mike, if I shot you a text, I might say, Mike, had you on my mind today. I just want you to know that I value our friendship. And hey, man, I think that things are going to be looking up for you and your pharmacy. I just wanted you to. It's specific, okay? Don't ever send anybody just like, hey, man, just checking in today. If you do. always start with somebody's name.
Right.
Because I could copy and paste the text and send it to 100 people and then be like, oh, I got a text from Sexton. And it's like, what's the same text I sent to
For sure.
100 different people? If I wanted to be a volume encourager, that's what I would do. But I don't want to do that. I want to be specific with it. And I want to have a message in that encouragement. There needs to be a message there. And it needs to be targeted. It needs to be tailored to that person that you're encouraging. And you don't have to go, you don't have to pontificate for 10 minutes. I'll tell you what I do sometimes. I've got a relatively new smartphone, and a good friend of mine, Kristen Sherry, she said, I send voice text to people. I'm like, that's brilliant. So now I can actually speak the encouragement in a text. And I can say, Mike, man, today's going to be a good day. Let me tell you why. And I just felt like I needed to tell you that because I just kind of got the sense, or I see a post that maybe you were going through something, and I'll check in and I'll say, hey, man, are you doing okay? I saw your post. I just want to make sure you're okay. And if you need to talk, I've got some time. Let's talk. Or I'll just pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, I saw this. I just wanted to check on you. You okay? You doing okay? I had a friend of mine that a couple of weeks ago had an emergency appendectomy. I just picked up the phone and called him and said, man, just checking on you. I had an appendectomy when I was 8. I know those things are not fun. Just want to make sure you're doing okay.
I suck at that. I wish I was more like that probably. And maybe it's from growing up thinking that I would be a burden on somebody by getting in a conversation and they weren't ready for it, or they weren't, they had stuff going on. But that's a cool skill.
Yeah, but when we talked about that, we talked about filing that away. Let me tell you something. Even in that moment, when they're not ready to receive it, you would be blown away, Mike, at people that have come back to me and go, man, I got your text a few days ago and it really helped me. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. But, man, it really helped me.
Texting I'm okay on, but I suck at calling people like that.
Well, you never know what you're going to be able to say to them to be able to help them.
Yeah.
And so, again, listen, the reason people don't do more intentional encouragement, it's real simple. You have to give way more than you receive. And people are not wired that way now. We're used to being a give, likes, retweets, followers, things like that. We're caught up in numbers. And the way you build relationship is not a numbers game. The only number that counts in building relationships is 1.
Yeah.
It's one at a time. It's one step at a time in building a great relationship. And so, that's why, and again, that's why I'm so purposeful. I hate the word passion. I hate it because I'm not passionate every day about intentional encouragement when I get up.
Yeah.
I may have, last night, I remember, I woke up last night, my left hip started hurting. I was like, I'm reaching for some BioFreeze that I keep near the bed so I could just go back to sleep, be like, soothing relief. I'm not doing a commercial for BioFreeze, but what I'm saying is, but when I got up, when the alarm went off at 6:20 this morning, Mike, I wasn't real passionate about getting out of bed.
Yeah.
But I was purposeful. I knew what I wanted to do for that morning and wanted to get it off to a good start. And so,
yeah,
and so again, and trust me, when I saw my son today, I was like, dude, you should have went to, what were you thinking being up at 2 a.m. this morning? Go to bed.
Yeah.
You left, he was like, yeah, when you got up and shut the door, I knew it was like, I should have had to got up and shut the door.
That's what sons are good for.
Oh, man, I have morphed into my dad.
I know, we have, haven't we?
If you take the contact lenses out and the beard, I become my dad. And so, and it's like, it was God saying, all those years you were resistant. Here you go, big boy.
Here you go. Well, Brian, thanks for being on.
Man, this has been fun conversation.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I hope that your audience that listens to this, reach out, connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn at Brian Sexton MBA. It's BRIAN. My last name is SEXTON, and I've got I have an MBA, so reach out to me. If you search the Intentional Encourager podcast, Mike is going to be on the Intentional Encourager podcast, but we tell a ton of great stories. If you just want a conversation that you hear people's stories and you go, man, that really resonates, I think the Intentional Encourager podcast is for you. So subscribe where you get podcasts. And if you hear this conversation when Mike releases it, you hear this conversation, you go, I want to know more about connection. Reach out to me. We'll do a Zoom call, or we'll do a call like we're doing today, and I'm more than happy to help you. People Buy From People is available on Amazon. You can buy it there. I'm getting ready to order some more author copies, so I'll have author copies available that people can get from me. They can buy them from me, and I'll sign it. But Mike, man, this has been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
We're talking on a Monday afternoon now. I think we're talking Thursday morning, right?
We are talking Thursday morning, yeah.
I get my second COVID shot, and I forget if it's before or after you and I talk. I think it's afterwards.
I'm hoping to get the vaccine, Mike, so I can get some kind of superpowers or at least a half a brain, That would be fantastic for me. But, man, what a great time I've had talking with you. And, again, I just hope that we brought some value to some folks today, some independent pharmacy owners, and got them thinking about things in a little different way. So thank you, man, from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for all you do. And I'm going to put a link to your book there. I just got on at least to the Kindle part where you can download the first few pages, and I did that before we talked here. Just looking at those chapters and subchapters, it's good stuff.
And if you buy the book and you've got some feedback, please reach out. I would dearly love to hear from folks that get the book. Even if you don't like it, you can still message me and go, it sucks. It's pretty terrible. And I'd probably go, I probably owe you one.
You'd say like that lady, you'd say, I'm going to tell you as peacefully as I can, get away from me.
Well, let me leave you with this piece of advice, okay?
Yeah.
A pat on the back is merely 18 inches from a kick in the butt. So, I mean, again,
Pretty
I just
close.
leave it there.
Pretty close. All right, Brian, thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.